the lines in the RTD system, and they're very important to Denver. And we see it as an opportunity, and there's a need to really catalyze a lot of investment in that corridor, both from a transit perspective and what the city needs going forward. So we've got a whole program of projects going on out there. As a way of background, what we're looking at doing is repurposing the existing right-of-way. That we want to minimize any right-of-way acquisition along the corridor. There may be some issues when we at intersections. This is a corridor that was built with Denver, so it's well over a century old in terms of what sort of utilities and transitway and roadway has been. This roadway has been used for. So that brings its own challenges. There's old trolley tracks in some places in the corridor. There's utilities that are right below the surface. We have ADA non-compliant corners and access issues that we would need to take care of as the project moves forward. This is a visualization of what we're anticipating doing. It's not necessarily a scale drawing, so I wouldn't get too bogged down in the details, but it does give you an idea of the concept, is that we want to repurpose the right-of-way, provide more space on the next to the store and the property fronts to provide more pedestrian space. We are looking at this as a mobility project, not just a transit project. That while the transit is the key catalyst for the whole redevelopment or the repurposing of the Colfax right-of-way, we're looking at it to improve pedestrian safety, improve pedestrian access, other modes, any micro mobility. Now it's not just cyclists, as you know, it's all the scooters and whatever they think of next that people will use to transport themselves. And the funding that we have available now, in 2017, Denver went to the voters with the Elevate Denver Bond initiative. And in that bond, there's $55 million set aside for the Colfax BRT. That was never intended to be the full amount. It was a catalyst amount, something we could use to put toward matching funds from the federal funds that would be available through FTA. We've been working very closely with RTD and CDOT, as well as the Federal Transit Administration, to make sure this project meets all of our needs and really modernize the transportation system along Colfax. As you know, Colfax, a lot of BRT systems are end-to-end or station-to-station type systems, commuter stations. Colfax is unique in that while it does serve some of those trips, there's a lot of on and off along this whole corridor. It's a circulator system. It's almost a combination of a long haul system with a mall type desire for how people want to use this system. People will walk over from the nearby neighborhoods to Colfax, want to get downtown or just get to a local shop. So it needs to meet a number of different needs. As part of our locally preferred alternative, we went through and looked at advancing some of our key intersections to get an idea of where we could add additional space at the corners, actually go into some preliminary design with survey and really map out where improvements can be made and identify what it is that we're looking to improve. And so this presentation that I flipped back to is what we presented to the task force and the public in August of 2018, after the bond had passed and when we were finalizing our locally preferred alternative. And then it took us the next couple of years to get our ducks in a row of moving into the next phase. And that's what I'll go into next in my presentation. What we're looking at doing now, even though we've been actively cooperating with the city of Aurora, they're very interested in our project, but the concept that we have now is to have a center running element from Broadway all the way out to the Denver border at Yosemite, where Aurora they weren't as interested in that center running element. So they wanted to have a transition back to a side running to get all the way out to Fitzsimmons. Our preliminary estimates of the full implementation is anywhere from $250 million to $500 million if we were to put everything in that was ever promised to anyone at any time. So we've got a broad gamut of what the improvements could be. The funding that we've identified and feel really strongly is available to us is obviously the $55 million that we have from the bond program, as well as small starts application, which could get us up to an additional $100 million. So at this point in time, that's the funding we're counting on, where we don't want to completely let our partners of CDOT and RTD off the hook just because things change going forward. But that's what we're focused on right now, is the FTA funding and the bond funding is how we're looking at moving this project forward. So I'm going to move back to my PowerPoint presentation. And so we've gone through this, just a brief overview of the project. And now it's just where are we in the project timeline? We'll go through that real quickly, and then some of the other projects that we've been doing, trying to put that large of a capital investment in that long of a corridor can take some time. And there may be elements and things that we can implement much sooner. So we'll go through some of the things we're doing there and then our next steps. So part of what we've been doing since the bond passed was making sure that we aligned all of our capital resources with understanding where all the utility conflicts were, understanding where Federal Transit Agency was, where CDOT is, where RTD is, making sure that our leadership was all aligned before we could go out with a selection for a consultant. We advertised for a consultant for the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act clearance and advanced preliminary design back in May. We've gone through that whole selection process now and have identified the Parsons Transportation Group team as our consultant partner. We've spent the last 3-4 weeks finalizing our scope negotiations with them, partnered with RTD. Susan and Brian Welch have been fabulous to work with to get the folks from RTD involved to review our scope. And we've worked with CDOT as well to really refine what scope CDOT is interested in. And so we've gone through that, and now we're starting our city council process. Any project in the city and county of Denver or any contract over $500,000 has to go to city council. This one is well above that for our NEPA and preliminary design. So that process takes a little bit of time. So we anticipate council approval late September, early October, and being able to issue a notice to proceed to the preliminary design and NEPA at the end of this year. So, early fourth quarter is what I'm projecting. And then is a project timeline. This is our publicly facing document that really looks at what it takes if we end up having to go sequentially. It's not a best case schedule, and it's certainly not a worst case schedule, but it does take into account a lot of the things that can trip us up as we go forward. And we are right now at toward the end of 2020, getting ready to start our preliminary design and environmental work. We've budgeted 18 to 24 months to do that work. Our consultant team is pretty confident that we can get through the full scope that we would like them to in that 18 months. There's other ways we can look to try to compress this schedule to get to construction and revenue service much sooner. But if we run into substantial design issues or substantial right-of-way issues, or procurement to acquire right-of-way is an arduous process that can take some time. So while we're looking for ways that we can accelerate the schedule, we do want to make sure that we're providing something realistic to the public on how long these things can take. The scope that we have in this next phase is we're looking at a documented categorical exclusion. It's one of the lower versions in terms of the documentation and requirements that the federal government puts on any federal money that we'd be using in this project. In our conversations with FTA, we've actually held ourselves to a higher standard than what FTA is thinking, because they're looking at this as a transit project, we're looking at as a right-of-way reconstruction project. So we want to be able to understand what we're getting into once we start peeling back that surface and needing to regrade some of the pavement. Are we going to run into those utilities, those trolley tracks, the accessibility issues, and make sure that we really understand what costs are going to be. So we've got a substantial element in this preliminary design element of the scope. We're going to do full survey. We want to design those really tight spots to make sure we understand what we're doing. We've got some pretty intense travel modeling, both in terms of mode, how many people that are in their cars today will end up on a transit system in this enhanced system. If we are, as you know, Colfax now has 2 travel lanes in each direction with turn lanes at many of the intersections. If you saw in that graphic that I showed, we are looking at removing the center 2 of those lanes to dedicate those to transit. So there's definitely concern that we've heard from the public and from CDOT that what happens to those cars. If we don't do anything, traffic is going to get really bad on Colfax. We need to really look at how we enhance the capacity to move people, and transit beats cars hands down in terms of the people carrying capacity. And by looking at really favoring the bus operations, we want to look at, we know we can improve the person carrying capacity of this roadway without widening and building more lanes. It's a hard message to get across because so many of us are used to being in cars. And so the concerns in the public outreach that we have a fairly extensive public outreach campaign to get people's concerns, talk to them, talk through how that mode shift is what we're really trying to drive, and that the intent is not to push vehicles onto the side streets. That things will happen. We don't want to hide from it and say everything's going to be great, but Denver's growing, traffic's growing. We need to realistically look at that and identify what it is that the impacts of these changes are going to have, and mitigate them as much as possible. Try to keep, again, not push people off of Colfax, but attract more people to Colfax and move more people along Colfax. So that's the public and stakeholder involvement coordination that we're going to be doing. And then that gets us all of this early work, identifying all of the environmental impacts and the mitigation efforts, all the early design that I've talked about. That gets us as really strong cost estimates, so we know how far the FTA and bond money that we have can go. And that's where the financial and funding analysis comes in, to see that what the thought at this point is to the most dense, highest ridership sections of the corridor, and where we get our most benefit is closer to downtown. So we would conceptually look at, and this can, the devil's in the details, and some of the details may change, but conceptually we're looking at center running from starting at Broadway, going as far as our money will take us in this phase, whether that's to Colorado Boulevard, or if we can get all the way to Yosemite, or if things work out great for us, can we get all the way out to the full package of improvements out to the Fitzsimmons campus? So we're looking at trying to phase it more, the full package for as far as we can go. But as part of the scope, we will also look at, does it make sense to do smaller improvements for the whole corridor? Again, the goal being to move as many people as we can as early in the project life cycle as we can. We continue our agency coordination. We've got several layers of that coordination. Our executive leadership meets every quarter. That includes our executive director, Ulyss Cleckley, FTA, the local region office executives come to the meeting. CDOT, Shoshana Liu is involved, and RTD, Brian Welch, and the RTD's leadership are at these meetings. Then we have our staff level meetings, and then we also are working internally with our partners within the city and county of Denver. This was specific to, we've had a task force of community representatives along Colfax involved from the beginning of the project, and their role will continue going forward. But we just had a meeting with them last week and talked through what their role would be, and agree that their role is a little bit higher, looking at that whole program of projects. Once we give a notice to proceed to our consultant, we'll be convening a stakeholder task force that is looking specifically at the Colfax BRT improvements and helping us go through the identifying mitigation or identifying impacts from the improvements and how we mitigate them. So that's the overall BRT update. Some of the things we're trying to do in the near term, we're partnering, as you know, with RTD. This is actually an RTD project. The 15L and 15 improvements are going in now. I think that project is nearing completion with some just some outstanding issues with some of the shelters that are going to be going in along Colfax to improve the operations of the 15L in the near term. Some of the safety improvements that City and County of Denver have installed, you may have seen if you've been on Colfax, some striped out bulb out areas along with plastic bollards that really provide more visual constraint to drivers, and it's surprisingly effective that people don't like to hit things regardless of how inconsequential it may be. Those plastic posts really do slow traffic down. People will take turns much slower. And it also improves sight lines for pedestrians crossing where there are those conflicts between vehicles and pedestrians. So we've put a number of these improvements in. We're also doing, we've looked at the crash history along the corridor and looked where we can identify or make both those, what we're calling paint and post type improvements, as well as signal timing improvements. I'll come back to that one. We're kind of proud of this. This is, you may have seen around the Denver metro area or in other locations in Colorado, what's called a leading pedestrian interval. This is where if you're waiting for a walk signal to, say, cross Colfax, the Colfax traffic will get a red and stop. And then the walk signal will come up for a pedestrian about 3 to 7 seconds before the side street green for the vehicles go. That gives pedestrians a head start to get out into the street so that their visibility is increased and it enhances the safety for any turning vehicles coming off of that side street. We've done those in spot intersections around the city, but on Colfax, we've implemented the whole corridor. The whole corridor now has, all of these intersections have that leading pedestrian interval. And that was installed earlier this year. One of the things the task force and some of the council folks and other stakeholders are interested in are more near-term improvements that require some civil infrastructure. Colfax and Fairfax has been identified, and it has a fair amount of interest, so we give updates on this project in particular, that since it requires civil improvements and significant investment, we don't want to build it, have the BRT come through and say, oh, you need to move that curb 6 inches one way or the other to make that intersection work. So we do want to make sure that we get far enough down our preliminary design in this next phase that we're just about ready to kick off to make sure that any improvements that require curb and gutter or signal or heavy infrastructure improvements won't be in the way of any of the improvements that the Colfax BRT operations will require. So the Colfax and Fairfax has been analyzed by our traffic engineering team, the folks under our city traffic engineer, and we're looking to, it'll be one of the earlier projects that we implement once we make sure that we can do it in conjunction with the BRT improvements. If for folks that live or go through the Colfax area, you may have noticed that we've got some pretty intense stormwater, both flooding issues that we're trying to address, as well as at Colfax and Jackson right now. There's a big stormwater project that's going on right now where they've taken 2 lanes of Colfax and are building a large box. That project is nearing completion at Jackson, and then we'll be over the next, in the late 3rd or 4th quarter, we're looking at doing some improvements down 16th Street, which will help improve some of the flooding issues that we have on Colfax. So our next steps, again, I think I've talked through it a little bit through the presentation. We've got what are our near-term improvement requirements. We'll continue meeting with the task force. We're going to convene our stakeholder team. We'll continue all of the coordination efforts that have been ongoing at both the staff level with our agency partners, as well as at the executive level, as well as a lot of the other program projects. Again, that we've got urban redevelopment money. We've got some housing improvements that are going in. All of these projects, along with the city and county of Denver, is investing in to improve safety and the capacity of the carrying the person trip capacity of the roadway moving forward. So that's what I have. Open to questions here, and we'll go from there.
All right, questions.
Yeah, Mike, this is Ben. You know, I've ridden the Euclid Avenue line in Cleveland. Is this kind of similar? Are you familiar with that project?
I am not, unfortunately. I wish our historian Ryan Billings is the one who's been involved with the project the most. I won't even hazard a guess.
That's okay. Yeah, no, I'm just curious because I've ridden it and I'm familiar with it. It has a.
Does it run in the center like we're proposing on this project?
Yeah. Yeah, center
it likely is very similar in a built environment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But so just kind of looking ahead, it seems like Denver's going to do all the street improvements and all that, and then is the kind of the deal that RTD buys the vehicles and then we'll operate the line once the street work's all built out?
The handshake agreement that we've got at the moment would be the intent is to use buses or articulated buses similar to what's in the RTD fleet now. We did explore looking at special purpose buses or buses specific to the Colfax BRT service, but that brings in other operational issues for RTD. Let me take a step back. The idea at this point is that Denver would take the lead on building the improvements and constructing the infrastructure, and then we would like RTD to maintain and operate the service. As part of operating that service, if the buses are integrated into or similar to the buses in their existing fleet, that makes maintenance easier. It makes operational decisions much easier. And Susan, correct me if I'm saying any of this incorrectly, but we can meet both goals without having to expand the maintenance facility. We can get newer buses. We do, as part of our costing, we will look at a new fleet of buses, but most likely ones that are similar to what are in the fleet currently. And then, but that said, we would have improvements like off-board. It would be more like the light rail system where you buy a ticket off-board and then have boarding both front and back so that you're not stopped in the station or at a bus stop as long, so you can get more efficient on and off at each stop. Things along those lines are the operational improvements that we'd look at.
Thanks.
Susan, did I miss anything?
No, I think you stated that exactly correctly.
Okay, great.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Travis. No, it's okay, go.
Okay, my question is, has there been any thought like what the branding of this corridor will look like? So if you're new to Denver, the Route 15 doesn't really stand out as something that communicates high frequency 24-hour service, if that makes sense.
Your sound was really low, but I think you're talking about branding this service.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, yeah, that's absolutely something we'll be looking at, is how we really highlight this service and let people know that it exists. It is, build that excitement around it. One of the public outreach sub-scopes that we've negotiated with the consultants is to look at how do we really market the service and promote the service so that you get the most benefit from the use of it. Bus wraps or how you name it, station design.
Mike, you're fading out a little bit.
That's how all those elements work. I'm fading out. Oops. I'll
Yep.
get closer.
There
Sorry
you go.
about that.
Other questions? Maybe,
Okay.
Mike, you want to repeat that last answer a little bit there at the end.
Sure. Yeah, the branding is certainly an element of the scope we'll be looking at in this next phase, both from what the line would be called to station design elements to really promote the use of the service and make sure that we're getting the most bang for the investment that we're putting into the corridor.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Elizabeth, did you have a question?
I do, and it's a little bit of a out in the far left field question, so forgive me. The historic preservation is kind of coming out in me, and when you had mentioned that you're finding some of the trolley lines and things like that, is there anything being done to document that historic or that historic story, or a effort to do some preservation? I know there's a little bit downtown. I want to say it's on Blake Street, and I might be wrong. It might be Wynkoop. But is there anything being done to, with whether it's with Colorado History Museum or something to kind of preserve that story of Colorado's history?
The short answer is yes. This next phase identifies those cultural, historical, and other environmental resources, and we'll have to identify a plan for how we document any of those historic resources. I've worked on other corridors in Denver where we look at everything from leaving the tracks in place, and if there's a way to do that and have an interpretive station, to if we have to pull them out using the rails and artwork or other, again, a lot of times in situations like this where the rails end up being in the way, we end up having to do interpretation type things either along the corridor or, like you said, in the Colorado Museum. So I fully anticipate that we'll have some effort along that line and make sure that we get the historic clearance will definitely be part of the process.
Thank you.
Can I get a question?
Go ahead, Matt. We got time for one more.
Yeah, it's a short one. I just wondering if you thought about nudging RTD into the modern era and requiring prepaid fares all along the corridor, which really should be the case on the Flatiron Flyer. And I ask that because if you're going to do it, you want to make sure you have room for and the technology for ticket vending machines at all the stations.
Absolutely, that's definitely one of the components that will be integral to the success of the BRT line is the off-board fare payment. So you'd have to buy your ticket at just like at a rail station in the system now. You'll have the ticket vending machine and have a pass that you would pay offline and then board at all the doors so that we can get people on and off much quicker and not have to have people fumbling for change as they're getting on the bus.
Great, that's terrific.
All right.
And I see there's a question about getting other questions to me, and yeah, I'm happy to provide my email address, and feel free to contact me.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Very informative. We're excited. I live right in the middle of that corridor, so I'm, of course, very excited to see it come to fruition.
Awesome. Yeah, we're excited to see it moving too. Thank you.
All right, Joanna, I'm going to keep moving on. I think she was having some connection problems. Our next presentation is Elizabeth Matthews, going to talk about Southeast Rail Extension land development.
Yeah, excited to let everybody know what's happening down on the south end and the 3 stations within the Ridgegate community. I will get this up here and share my screen. Okay. All right, can everybody see my screen okay? Okay. So just to give you guys a little bit of background about what Ridgegate is, who Coventry Development is. I have worked with Coventry Development for 17 years. I'm a project manager, and we have a historic resource within the Ridgegate community called Schweiger Ranch. It's the beginning of the Ridgegate story. So I'll start with where Ridgegate is. It is in Douglas County in Lone Tree, incorporated within the city of Lone Tree. It is south of Lincoln Avenue, and it is bisected by I-25. Ridgegate was actually purchased from Arapahoe Building Company in 1972, and Coventry Development Corporation was formed to be the master plan developer for the owners of the land. And so we've been around since 1972. In the late 90s, Public Service Company came to Ridgegate and said, we need to put a substation on your property. You can either work with us and tell us where to put it, or we'll put it wherever we want to. And so that really started the whole master plan for the Ridgegate community. Also, something important to know, well, and the vision for Ridgegate ultimately is to be a new urban pedestrian-friendly, transportation-friendly community where people don't have to be dependent on their vehicles. The west side of I-25 started before 2000, well, it's roughly 2001, when Skyridge Medical Center, Health One came to Ridgegate and said, we need to build a hospital. And we sold the land to Skyridge Medical Center, which opened in 2003. In 2004, the Southeast Rail extension was included into Fast Tracks, and it was completed in May of 2018. The underlying land planning for the east side of I-25, now that the west side is nearly complete, started in 2016. So our underlying guidelines are sub-area plans approved to the city of Lone Tree, as well as some design standards and guidelines as a master plan community. So I will start on the west side. We have the Skyridge station. Is the first station as you enter Ridgegate coming from Lincoln Avenue. As you can see, we have 2 apartment buildings already constructed. There is a hotel on the north side. What's currently under construction right now is the Kiewit project, and there's a vacant piece of land across the street. And then there is also a small Charles Schwab building just south of Kiewit. Kiewit actually purchased their land last year in June. They are building 400,000 square feet of 2 office buildings that will employ 1,800 people. They also have a 950 space parking garage. Building 1 is they're both under construction, but building 1 was started first, and we expect completion probably mid-2021, so mid-next year. And then building 2 will be complete in 2022. They've started construction on that one with foundations. The apartment project across the street from the Skyridge station is a 5-story multifamily, smaller unit market rate apartment. And we're expecting construction to begin on that later this year. It could be next year. The developer is wary of some construction costs, but we expect it to be complete by 2022. The other interesting thing about this particular building is that it's using a building system called Powered by Prescient, and it's a steel structural system put together differently. It's supposed to make it more efficient. Typically, apartment buildings take about 1.5 years, and it's supposed to cut about 6 months off of the construction time. There is some small retail down on the ground floor to engage the building with the street and to sit within our agreement with the city of bringing the retail component to the Skyridge station. Moving across the highway, and kind of on a little bit of a light rail train, we cross the highway and we hit the Lone Tree City Center Station. This station was required by the FTA, and actually it's in our plan, but the FTA requires that it stops there. And the eventual build out for that area is to be a high density, new urban, not downtown like, we're calling it more Cherry Creek North block sizes. It's office, residential, additional retail, corporate campus type of area. It's about 400 acres right there. We're looking at possibly 10, 20, 30 years for a build out on this particular area. We're waiting for, honestly, a corporate employer to come in and energize that area. The next station, and where we are focusing first, because we do have a parking garage as well as a water line there, is the Ridgegate end of line station. And this is the conceptual master plan that was envisioned for this station. And you can see towards the upper right is this parking garage. There are 2 multifamily buildings and an attainable housing. We were working with a condo developer, but COVID happened and they dropped out. But the 2 multifamily and the attainable housing are still continuing to move forward. The 2 multifamily next to the Ridgegate station are market for rent. They're 5 stories, 540 units total between the 2 phases. We expect construction to start mid next year and complete by the end of 2022. There will be some small coffee shop that runs off of Railway to also bring the retail component to the Ridgegate station. We are working with Coble & Company to build an attainable 67-unit attainable housing, 4 stories, and it is going to be a mix of 30%, 60%, and 80% AMI. And we expect the construction to begin next year, Q2, I want to say March-ish, and then it will be complete by the Q3 of 2022. The big one is across Happy Canyon Creek, and that's probably about half a mile to a mile from the RTD station. We have been working with Shea Homes as our master builder partner. This is their current preliminary plan, which is sitting within the city of Lone Tree, and it's for 1,900 single family for sale residential. So there'll be some single family attached, but primarily single family detached. There will be also, Shea's not responsible for building this, but there will be a regional park, as well as there's a school site and several interior park sites. Douglas County is really big on their trails, and they're currently building the 2nd phase of the East-West Trail connection, which will connect Parker, Cherry Creek Trail, all the way over to Chatfield. And that all connects to the Highline Canal as well as down to Durango. So we're expecting infrastructure to begin on the Shea product, their first phase after the first year of 2021, and then move-ins Q4 of 2022. So lots of exciting things coming, lots of people coming, lots of energy coming. It's exciting and scary all at the same time. So any questions?
Questions?
Yes, I have one. I'm concerned about the DRCOG MetroVision process, that this appears to be far outside of where they want density showing up.
I am not familiar with that DRCOG document. That would be something that the city of Lone Tree would be familiar with. And yes. This has all been approved by the city of Lone Tree. So, and I know that there are members of the city council who are part of DRCOG, but as far as I know, this has been approved.
This is Heather. Are Lone Tree residents in the RTD district?
Yes, they were incorporated. RTD, it was incorporated prior to the 2004 fast tracks inclusion, and I want to say it was 2002, 2003.
Okay. But generally south of there, they're not in the district, right?
Correct. Castle Rock is not, Castle Pines is not. Highlands, I think most of Highlands Ranch is, as well as Parker. Yes.
Have you noticed that most of the riders are out of district, or does anybody track that, or?
You know, that's actually really interesting. We've been wanting to find that out. And I don't know that there is a way, because people out of district have to pay for parking.
Yeah, Susan may be able to talk a little bit about that. We had some issues with end of line parking and made some changes on parking rates.
Yeah, the parking rates are for out of district are definitely higher than for those who are in district. But we do license plate surveys to look at where riders are coming from and when they park at the parking, and then our folks in our planning department actually take that information and can put that together graphically, and you can see where folks are coming from. That's a really interesting question. You know, I don't know if we have done that yet for the end of line station for the Southeast Extension, because it's been in operation a little over a year now. But I can find out, because I worked on this project. I would be interested to know that as well. But yes, we can track it.
Cool.
Do we have any idea of what ridership is looking like? I know that normally with those extensions, it takes a much longer time for individuals to get used to having those stations up, but I think it would be interesting to have some data on how people are using those 3 extensions.
I can definitely get that information because it has been looked at. I think it's also, what I am recalling is that at least up until the time that COVID happened, that the ridership was building and it was at a point that was anticipated. We always expected the line to be popular and for people to use it, and we had got federal funds on that basis. So I think it was holding true. But with COVID, ridership's down overall. But still, I can look and see what information we have on that to share.
And also, just to let you guys know, the city of Lone Tree did bring in the bus stang from Colorado Springs, and it does drop off at the Sky Ridge station. I don't have exact ridership numbers on that one, but I did reach out to the city to see if they could provide that.
Do you have any estimate of build-out population and employment and how that relates or compares to the current population and employment for Lone Tree?
Sure. So the numbers are big. So the current population in Lone Tree is, some people say 15,000, but I think it's more between 13 and 14,000. Current residents within Ridgegate are roughly 6,500. Right now, between Schwab with at pre-COVID, they were at 4,500 employees. Sky Ridge Medical Center was roughly 2,000 pre-COVID. We're anticipating, residence-wise, I think that we will see an additional 10,000 residents on the east side. And then I don't like to guess on the commercial side just because of how everything's changing, but there's millions of square feet of commercial and retail. This one honestly competed for Amazon, so that was 50,000, potentially 50,000 employees that would have come in. So it's significant.
What else do folks have? Any other questions?
I have an addition to what you said, Elizabeth. There's a huge mass of Lockheed Martin employees that are moving to that area. I actually am moving to that area for that particular reason. So there's, I think, 4,000 employees that are moving to the north of Lincoln into that new building starting in October. So there should be probably some more people from that industry in the aerospace.
Yeah. Lockheed is moving into the old Time Warner building off of Lincoln and Park Meadows. Yeah. And also Lone Tree has the on-link demand. It has been down since COVID, and it's a free service, on-demand service that they provide to residents of Lone Tree, within Lone Tree, as well as to employees. And they did this to be able to do that last mile connection between the Lincoln Station and Schwab, as well as Sky Ridge and Kaiser.
One more question, anyone? All right, thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
So last agenda item is just some updates. The general manager's CEO, not CEL search update. The press release, there were 3 finalists. Next Tuesday, the 25th, will be a special board meeting that is the sole agenda item is to take public input and feedback on the candidates. You can also go to the website and submit comments there, review resumes and information, and then submit comments. I think the board, talking to the chair, the board hopes to be able to then at the end of that session on the 25th, go into an executive session and make a decision. That, I think, that is her desire. I think we never know what the board is going to do. But that is the direction that they're heading. I don't know if Christina or Lindsay have any other information that's changed. That's the latest that I had heard. That's the latest information I have on the timing. And then other updates, RTD Accountability Committee.
You're breaking up, Roger. Can you get closer to your microphone?
How is that? Is that any better?
Yes, I heard my name. This is Christina, but I couldn't tell what you were asking.
I was just saying, is there any? We've got a windstorm here, and I'm getting a bad feedback here. So, Christina, is there anything else on that you know any information about?
On what?
On the general manager search.
No, just that we have 3 videos, presentations from each of the candidates up on our website. We also have a questionnaire that people can, after viewing the videos, can vote, so to say, on their candidate of choice. So I would recommend we have people go in and do that. I believe it closes on Sunday, so there's a quick turnaround time on this because the board does want to make a decision pretty quickly.
Tuesday. I'll send out the link to that. I know Roger mentions in chat that he got the survey. So
I did too from RTD. This is Heather.
Great. So I'll get a link out so everyone can look at those videos. It's a little different process, obviously, because of COVID. The past 2 searches had kind of public meet and greets and more opportunity to interact with the candidates. But the videos, I think, are a creative way to try to give a little more of an essence of the folks. And then again, Tuesday night, feel free to jump in on by phone to provide comment or submit it online. All right, second item was the RTD Accountability Committee. It met for the first time August 10th. That meeting was largely organizational to get their arms around the task. They meet again Monday at 8 o'clock. I believe they're open to the public. I have requested the link, and I will be happy to send that out as soon as I get it. I just have not received it yet. If anyone wants to watch those accountability committee meetings. Hopefully we'll get a better, I think they're trying to get organized and understand better. They have a very broad and rather undefined mission. And I think they're trying to get their, I heard one Aurora City Council member mention the other night, on Monday night at their council meeting, that they've been given broad, kind of very broad parameters, but I think she indicated they don't really know what that means. I mean, how to even tackle all of the issues that, of course, the agency is working on. But I'll make sure that you get the link as soon as I get the link on that. The other item, we've talked a few months about RTS partnering on candidate forums. We are very close to knowing all of our RTD candidates. There was, as of last night, there was one candidate that whose petitions had not been reviewed for sufficiency by the Secretary of State's office, everyone else. So we probably will see that final one today or tomorrow, I'm imagining. The Metro Mayor's Caucus has a transportation committee meeting next Friday. And they are very interested in planning to partner with us, the CAC and local chambers and their jurisdictions on hosting some sort of forum for candidates. Looks like we will have 3 districts that are unopposed, and then the rest would have multiple candidates that would be able to, we could have some sort of forum with. We may end up having a forum with the 3 unopposed. I'm just not sure how many people would participate in those. But the Metro Mayor's Caucus they are proceeding forward with the intent to work with us, with you all on sponsoring these events. So we are making progress there. And then the N-line opening, I think there's been some communication out of communications. That is coming up in September. There is some different approaches that are being considered. Obviously, the COVID pandemic makes it a little tricky. I'm not sure there is a final decision on how that grand opening will operate, if there will be any sort of an opportunity for people to participate, other than there will be free rides and the other types of things that are traditionally done for an opening. But very excited to get that line open. And those are the updates. Christina, Lindsay, anyone else with any announcements or updates that you'd like to provide the group?
Sure, this is Christina again. I am working on, actually Lindsay and I are working on right now to finalize a couple finishing touches on a series of live videos that we're hoping to post tomorrow, or at least by the end of the week. The videos, I think I mentioned before, are just short how-to to introduce people to the live discount program. And it will be accompanied by a partner toolkit. So the partner toolkit will have a bit of information for anyone on this call who may want to plug this into a newsletter, any social media, or help us to get the word out that the Live Discount program is out there, how to use it. And if you don't qualify for the Live Discount program, we've got other discounts in which there'll be links to in all this content. So we will make sure that this gets out to the CAC as well. And again, if you guys can get that information out, we would appreciate it. And that's really all the updates I have. Lindsay, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'll just briefly mention that we will be doing service change public meetings probably sometime towards the end of September, early October for the upcoming January service changes, which will all be virtual this year. So something new for us to try out, but it will be important for the public to give us input at these meetings, since we are likely looking at a pretty large service change heading into 2021. So just note that is coming, and we'll provide more information once we have it.
All right. Well, I thought this was a great meeting. We had good attendance, and it's great to have our new members join us, even virtually. We will meet again via Zoom on September 16th. If you noted on the agenda, I also list the October meeting date. That typically has been the meeting that we would meet in the evening and have a roundtable dinner with the board and senior leadership team. Kind of doubtful that'll happen, but so we may end up moving it to 3 to 5, or we may leave it in the evening, but I would still anticipate us inviting the board and the senior leadership team to join us in some sort of a roundtable, even if it's virtual. And with that, I think we're done. Unless anyone has anything else. And again, thanks to Susan and Elizabeth and Mike for your presentations, and we'll see everyone on the screen next month. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Roger.
Thanks, everyone.